Some of you will probably deduce what county I'm talking about from the few clues I give you anyways, but I gotta change up the story enough for plausible deniability. You know the drill. Standard creepypasta stuff. My county was as big as Dallas or Austin County, but only has a population of 14,000 people in it. A lot of places you can only travel on foot. It's as bayou as you can get and still be in Texas. Creeks and rivers run through the veins, proning the area to flash floods. The most common sight is tightly packed forest pushed up against blacktop roads. The most common way to die is falling asleep at the wheel or being ambushed by a suicidal deer. Since there's not a lot of people, and these people are poor, it means deputies are paid, well, crap. Not that I was only in it for the pay. I loved being a cop. I pledged to be one of the good ones that stuck to his ideals and didn't become a cynical asshole. Well, I stuck to my ideals, but became more of an asshole each passing day. What's worse than the pay is the safety concerns. There were only 2 deputies on at a given night, one for the south end and one for the north. That means your only backup is usually 20 to 40 miles away from you. And if your partner is also handling an emergency, then you're out of luck. This made the area seem like one of the last remaining bits of the Wild West. You really had to keep your wits sharp and watch your six when you were alone in the woods. As romantic as the idea was of being like Walker, Texas Ranger, it almost got me killed. It was a perfect storm of circumstances. My county had suffered from severe flooding the week before this story happened. The water was going down in most parts, but some places were still flooded. Another great thing was our radios had been down all day. Someone coming to fix them in the morning. And the rain began pouring again. The call came in around midnight about a man beating on a woman's door. The man was demanding to be let in and out of the rain. The woman said she was alone with her baby and she needed a cop fast. I was in the dispatch location in the jail side of the sheriff's department when the call came in. My dispatcher, who was like Mother Hen, gave me a look. I got a live one look. Her eyebrows raised and she snapped at me to get my attention. Her phone tucked to her ear while her other hand typed furiously. I listened to her repeat the information out loud for me as I scribbled down the caller's address in my notepad. It was in the flash flood zone. It was passable, but the continuing storm was changing that quick. Another hour of hard rain would cut it off to the rest of the world. My dispatcher swiveled in her chair to look right at me, her face serious. "Give me a call on your phone when you get close. Radios are still down, so I'll call you every 10 minutes for a security check." "Got it," I said as I spun around to hurry to my patrol car. "I let the South End deputy know what's going on in case he needs to get to you," she quipped as the heavy door in the jail slammed behind me. I appreciated the gesture from her, but having backup almost an hour away didn't mean much if things popped off. Backup could be coming from the moon for all the difference it made. I squeezed myself into the crowded seat of my patrol vehicle. I hadn't even entered the address into my onboard GPS when my phone started ringing. It was dispatch. "What do you got?" I asked. There was an unusual pause before she spoke. I could hear the concern in her voice. "Hey, just learned this. Our caller said it may be Ezekiel Burrows out there." I paused before turning the key in the ignition. This was not good. I had dealt with Zeke before. It was back when I was a rookie. I'll have to put this story on hold to fill you in with a flashback episode first. I had been working for about 2 weeks at the time. I was still riding shotgun with my FTO. A unanimous caller rang the sheriff's department complaining Zeke and his older brother were driving around pointing guns at people and firing into the air. My FTO had been a stereotype of an old county cop who was about to retire. He was laid back and calmly gave me instructions between drags of a cigarette. He wore a bushy white walrus mustache and cowboy hat that fitted him perfectly. When the call came across the radio, his demeanor had flipped like a switch. He sat forward and flicked his cig out the window. His face darkened. "Okay, deputy, this could get dangerous. Stay alert, stay close, and do everything I tell you." We were burning towards the call pretty fast when he offered this additional piece of information. I know these two brothers. They've been known to fight with the police. Don't be afraid to go hands-on if you need to, he said in his slow Texas drawl. My body dumped a ton of adrenaline for a fight or flight response, and I felt my stomach turn. I was glad my FTO was so calm with me. In those days, I used to be ashamed of the butterflies in my stomach. I thought it meant I was weak or a coward. Now I realize it's my body's way of protecting itself, and I need to embrace that feeling. We found the brothers, slow rolling around in a hunter green Dodge Neon. It was missing a driver's side mirror and had a giant hole where a red brake light should be. It was great when they made the job easy. We initiated a felony takedown. That's pretty much when you point your weapon at the suspect's vehicle while standing behind your open car door. You give loud verbal commands like, "Driver, step out of the vehicle slowly." Anyway, we had both of them pulled out and detained in handcuffs. Nothing of note really happened except for there being 2 shotguns and 3 rifles in the back seat, ammo and shell casings everywhere. Not illegal in the state of Texas, just highly suspicious. The original caller wanted to remain anonymous, so we had nothing to prove they were firing from the vehicle. My FTO dealt with Zeke's older brother while I talked to Zeke. I can't remember the brother's name. We'll just call him Turd for now. My FTO had our dispatch run both of their names to see if they had any active warrants. So we got some tense and awkward moments with the brothers while they waited to see if they were going to jail or not. Turd ran at the mouth for the duration of the stop, called us every racist and vulgar thing in his extensive vocabulary of no-no words. Me, being a rookie, got a little frustrated at some of the things he had allegedly done to my mother, so I turned my attention to Zeke. Zeke stood there downcast and drenched in sweat. It was only 80 degrees, but he looked like he was about to suffer a heat stroke. His whole body began to tremble, slightly, and swayed back and forth. "You okay, Zeke?" I asked, and stepped closer to him. I thought I might have to catch him before he passed out on me. See, Zeke smelled like hot garbage. It was pretty overpowering, a mixture of sweat and ass. I didn't want to touch him, but he was cuffed behind his back, and I couldn't let him tip over with nothing but his head to break his fall. Luckily for me, Zeke straightened up when I reached for him. His eyes bulged out as he looked right at me, his teeth bare and grimace. "Is this one gonna kill me, Jesus?" he whispered in a raspy voice. His vacant eyes locked with mine. "No, Zeke. You're just being detained while we check if it's good to let you and your brother go," I said while trying to hide how creeped out I was. Zeke paused and tilted his head to the side slightly. A smirk touched the edge of his mouth as he nodded like he was in agreement with something. The next thing he said was something really strange. It's been a while since that day, so my memory's foggy, but I remember it being something like, "I'm supposed to tell you to remember my face during the massacre." "What?" I said, as I turned to face him squarely. His brother must have heard the change in my tone of voice. He leaned over to yell past my FTO, "Hey, keep your mouth shut, Zeke. Let me handle these pigs." Zeke considered his brother calmly and replied, "You will be alone when you die, brother." Turd's eyes widened and I saw pure fear flash across his face. He scoffed and tried to play it off by laughing, but I could see through his bravado. His brother scared him. Long story short, both brothers came back with clear warrants. The original 911 caller wanted to remain anonymous. This meant we had no witness to any alleged illegal activity. With nothing to hold them for, we let them loose. But I do remember one more creepy thing Zeke said. When they were uncuffed, the two walked to the back of their car. Turd went for the driver's seat, and Zeke went to sit in the seat behind him. "I'm your chauffeur now, bish?" Turd asked angrily. Zeke was staring at something in the passenger seat while shaking his head slowly. "No," Zeke replied coyly. "He's already sitting there. I'm not going to make him mad. He's already been staring at you all day." Turd said something muffled, and Zeke got in the driver's seat. As they drove away, I could see Zeke sitting in the back, half turned and pointing at something beside his brother in the passenger seat. Before they pulled out of earshot, I could hear Turd begin to scream profanities at his brother. So that's the previously on TV show of my life. That was the first run-in with Zeke, and now it seemed I was racing to him again years later. Zeke's little origin story always sat different with me. I never encountered him in person after the initial contact, but word of his exploits would always reach me. An elderly woman had her door kicked in by the two brothers. She was beaten and robbed. Didn't call the cops until a week later because her grandson made her. She was too terrified to give a witness statement, but her grandson told me the entire street knew it was Zeke and Turd. An outdoor birthday party called when Zeke popped out of the woods and started firing a shotgun in the air. I spent the rest of the night trying to reel in trigger-happy relatives looking for Zeke in the woods. The caller, who was 90% sure it was Zeke, kept calling dispatch and threatening to kill the sheriff on recorded lines. He was mad when his brother was arrested. Problem was, Turd was arrested by a neighboring county. It was evident Zeke was sliding further and further to the dark side. He was the Riddler to my Batman. I could never catch up with him. He just left problems for me to deal with. But maybe now I had him, and I could physically put cuffs on him. My GPS said I was 10 minutes out from the caller's house. Visibility was low, and I could feel my ride trying to hydroplane a few times. When I was about 2 minutes out, the road before me just seemed to disappear. The white lines just vanished as water flooded the road. Turning on my takedown lights didn't reveal where the high water ended, so I stepped out of my car to take a better look. In the darkness, all I could hear was the sporadic thumping of droplets hitting my raincoat and the mechanical back and forth of the wipers and overdrive. Before me was a flat plane of water rippling from millions of raindrops. Every few seconds, the area would illuminate with lightning, showing me the deep water continued around the bend in the road. My mind went back to the PS1 days of Silent Hill. First thing I did as a terrified 5th grader was try to leave the town, only to find an endless drop-off into the fog. I had that similar feeling of dread now. But this time it was like an impromptu lake and not a cliff, and I was running towards the danger and not away from it. I was weighing my options and considered letting dispatch know it was impossible. I was in a Charger, not a Tahoe. Maybe Zeke found somewhere else to stay dry. I mean, he hasn't broken any laws yet. My phone began to ring. It was dispatch. Before I could even say hello, I was met with, "He's back!" my dispatcher shouted. She's saying he's kicking at the door and beating on the windows. I can hear him threatening to hurt her in the background. At this moment, my only course of action was clear. I guess I'd be swimming if I had to. I slowly but steadily submerged my vehicle into the dark waters. I was praying it wouldn't stall out as the waters rose to about 2 feet high around me. Water began seeping in from the bottom of the doors as I made the bend in the road. I could see land before me as I begun to get more traction and pull up out of the water. I gassed my vehicle to give that one last lurch to exit the water and spin out onto the muddy road. I hit my brakes to get a quick layout of my surroundings, and the red stop sign at a 4-way intersection reflected back at me. I was now in a small residential community. My GPS told me the caller's house was across the intersection, but 3 houses down on the left. It was hard to see through the downpour, but I could see the road disappearing under the water again. I got out and I began to walk. I wasn't going to risk getting my car stuck and trapped in the driveway. As I sloshed forward, tension began to build in the back of my neck. Silent lightning would periodically illuminate me in a sea of ripples. A cold feeling surrounded my thoughts. A black hole opened in my stomach, sucking all the confidence from me. This was new. I had been scared before, but flight or fight had always set in with a burst of nervous energy. This was surreal. I felt like I was dreaming. I felt dread. I felt alone. I was in the water up to my knees when I reached the yard. I finally got some higher ground the closer I came to the front door. I squished around to my left and my right, checking the sides of the house. The house was a double-sized trailer, elevated 3 feet off the ground on stilts. I had to walk up the steep stairs to knock on the door. "Sheriff's Department," I yelled over the rain. I jumped back down with a splash off the narrow steps and scanned the darkness. I heard rumbling at the door as it opened a couple of inches, and I saw a feminine face peeking out at me. "Can I see your badge or something?" came her fearful voice. I cocked my head at this before I realized I was completely covered in my yellow Wyatt Air-Up raincoat. I unbuttoned my trench coat and I shone the flashlight on my badge and duty belt. "He was here just now," she said nervously. Her eyes darted back and forth, scanning the darkness. I could hear the frantic cries of her child from deeper in the house. "Lock the door, but stay by it for me. I'll check around back, so you don't worry if you hear me making noise back there." I waited till I heard her lock the door before pulling out my gun and circling around to the left. I circled around the whole house slowly, my small but powerful flashlight held at the center of my chest with my gun at the low ready. The entire perimeter of the house checked clear. My head was on a swivel, checking the thick forest pushing in from the darkness. I even checked her small car, pulled on the doors to see if any were left unlocked. There was nothing suspicious. He had gone. But I felt eyes on me. The cold dread sat heavy in my stomach, making me slightly nauseous. I could feel a nervous tingle at the base of my skull, making me want to turn my head frequently. Then, the obvious realization hit me, causing an extra punch to the gut. He was under the house. It was 3 feet off the ground. My dumbass had been walking around the house. I immediately dropped to one knee with a splash and a twist to aim my weapon and light under the house. My mind half expected a jump scare from Zeke, akin to the scene where they first show the xenomorph in the vents on Alien. My finger slowly loosened off the trigger as I saw nothing but interlocking planks of wood, cobwebs, and more darkness. I couldn't see fully under the house because it had been used to store old junk like a lawnmower, sandbags, and an old bicycle. I stared intently for a while, trying to make out a human form. Every time I moved the blinding beam of light, it caused dark shadows to dance underneath, mimicking movement. I wasn't satisfied that he wasn't under there, but I couldn't see a damn thing. I backed away from the house and began to think. He was near and he was probably watching me. I comforted myself with the realization he was scared of me, and I had a captive audience. He was either under the house or waiting in the forest trying to not make a sound by running. "Zeke!" I project my voice with as much authority as I could. "The Sheriff's Department! We know it's you out here!" I did a 360 around me with my flashlight as I slowly continued. "You haven't broken any laws yet. Go home now, and that's the end of it. If I have to come back, you are definitely going to jail. I promise that." As I finished my speech, I left the silence hang in the air for a dramatic effect. The thunder rolled in the distance to punctuate my seriousness. Feeling confident in my ultimatum, I sloshed my way back to my patrol car. But don't get me twisted, my dear listener. I'm not inept or cowardly. I had a plan, and leaving was a ruse. When I got to my car, I called dispatch to tell her the plan. I told her to let the caller know I was driving back to the stop sign down the road and dark out and wait for Zeke to return. Only 10 minutes had passed when, I swear it had been an eternity, on the dark road towards the house. As I sat in the darkness listening to the chaotic storm envelop me, I checked my phone. Only 10 minutes had passed when, I swear it had been an eternity. The strange dreamlike feeling flooded over me again. I had this quick thought telling me I had never even gone to the house in the first place. I had just been sitting here imagining the whole series of events that had just passed. Unsure, I patted my ankles to see if they were still wet. They weren't. I never trudged in the water to check on the scared mother, but I remember doing it. I don't know. Things are so foggy. I had this sudden urge to cry, and I didn't know why. I just felt so scared and so alone, and nothing made sense to me, and I fought back a sob. A harsh voice spoke to me, cutting through my confusion like a poisonous knife through my brain. It said I should just end it. It said I should just Use the tool holstered on my hip. Hot tears ran down my face as I fumbled with the retention locks on my holster. The coolness of my window was my only relief before the end. Good thing it was snowing. The snow always made me sad as it formed a white coat of ice around my window. Wait, snow? In Texas? Jolted with a gasp in my seat, as if waking from a dream. Maybe I was. A micro dream? I had a couple of those in Marine boot camp due to sleep deprivation, but why had it happen now? I shook my head vigorously to get my bearings back. The dark thoughts fled from me. I realized the power on the street must have gone out while I was in my reverie, because no light was coming from any house. Visibility was at 0. Alone with my thoughts in the darkness, I doubted my plan. I had enough of my mind playing tricks on me and wondered how long I should sit here like a creeper until I just go back on regular patrol. My phone lit up and I jumped to answer it before it could even ring. I immediately recognized my dispatcher's voice, but it sounded far away.
He's back. Right here.
Her voice cut out and the call dropped. Noise chimed in my ear. Sometimes the cell towers were spotty out here, especially during storms. Now I had a useless phone I couldn't call back up with. My only hope was my dispatcher who could get my partner rolling my way. He was around 30 minutes to an hour away, remember? As I slammed the door behind me and begun slodging through the rain, I thought to myself, on nights like this, I knew the future. I could just imagine the darkest timeline of events and it would happen. The thought of my cell phone crapping out on me had been a whisper in my mind since the night began. I didn't bring it to the forefront of my thoughts in hopes it wouldn't manifest, but it came true with all the other bad vibes of the night. I prayed no more latent fears would come to fruition, especially the deepest fear we all suppressed every time we wore a badge. I was splashing through the many oceans leading up to the front porch when I heard the screaming of a child. Not the normal screaming of a fussy infant, but a sharp, raspy scream, as if the child's throat was hurting from exertion. Out came my gun as I quickly ran towards the steep steps. I did a quick duck to scan underneath the house before I positioned myself beside the narrow stairs. I didn't go up them due to hearing about cops being shot off porches through closed doors as soon as they announced themselves. I banged on the lower part of the door with a fist and announced myself. I waited a beat before an answer or a gunshot. None came, and I weighed my options. I didn't have consent or a search warrant. As long as I believe danger's on the other side of the door, I can ram it in. The baby's scream began choking coughs, and I heard something thump loudly inside. I hopped up the steps and prepared to launch my shoulder into the door. A tiny voice from inside my head urged me to see if the door was unlocked. It should still be locked from the last time, but I tried it anyways. It opened a crack and I was hit with an awful stench. The closest thing I could compare it to is if someone with a severe sinus infection woke up with morning breath, ate rotten eggs, and blew it in your face. I pulled my head back to see a bulging eye staring at me from the top corner of the door. But this eye reflected like a cat or a raccoon's. In the split second before I kicked the door open, I could see the eye glint purple and retreat. I could hear the growl of a dog as the door swung open to the darkness within. My flashlight and my weapon swung around frantically searching for a dog or tall intruder with purple eyes, and I saw nothing but a small living room. TV to my right, couch to my left, counter in the front, me separating the living room from the kitchen. I could hear the child screaming and coughing from the hallway to my left. I took a couple of tentative steps towards the cries when a figure rushed out of the hallway towards me. I let out a yell and leveled my Glock to fire. I thank God I froze for an instant instead of shooting reflexively. In the split second that followed, I saw the mother with her head tilted sideways as her eyes rolled back. Her arms were trailing limply behind her as she fell. I stepped side out of her way as she crumpled to the floor beside me with a thud. Hindsight is 20/20, and maybe I should have caught her. But maybe part of me knew she had been throwing, so I kept my weapon aimed down the hallway, or that's what I tell myself anyways. The hallway was only 6 feet long. A bedroom to the right and left, with a bathroom in the middle. I had been in countless trailers with this layout. The bathroom door was closed, so whoever threw her out could be to the right or the left taking cover. I could see both of the doors were open. I spared a glance down at the woman. She was on her side facing me. Young and attractive, she was only in a light shirt and underwear. Her eyes were open. She was breathing quickly in short bursts. Her eyes had a trance-like stare, and I could see her skin glistening with a layer of sweat. I couldn't see blood or physical injuries on her, but she reminded me of a fish taken out of water and slowly dying. When I returned my gaze to the hallway, my brain couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. It appeared the hallway had gotten longer. Where my light had once illuminated the bathroom door, now there was only pitch black darkness. I moved my flashlight back and forth to reveal the darkness was a fixed object, like a cloud at the lip of a doorway. Even as I squinted and tried to grasp what I was seeing, the darkness seemed to grow closer. It leaked out like a fog into the living room. The door frame faded into blackness, then the walls around it, then parts of the couch beside it. The best way I could explain it is it looked like the world in front of me was disappearing, being swallowed up by the void. The dark reached across the room to flood after me. I looked down to see the world drop off into nothingness about a foot away from me. The bare legs of the woman laying beside me had already been consumed by it. I tried in vain to wave the darkness away with my light, to no avail. I backed into the TV and knocked it over. The familiar panic began to boil over within me. The dark whispers tore through my mind again. It was the same despair I had felt in the car. I wasn't afraid of dying on the job, but this was different. What was this darkness? What unimaginable terror waited for me in this approaching void? Would it take me to hell? If I died here, would God even see me? The darkness was right out of arm's reach when the glow of my flashlight was snuffed out and I was plunged into absolute darkness. My last light of hope disappearing caused a primal scream to build up in my throat. One last terrified plea before the madness overtook. Oh God, oh Jesus. I blinked rapidly as my flashlight sprung back to life, illuminating the room around me. The unnatural darkness had retreated. I blinked repeatedly as the horrid thoughts flew from me, leaving me shaking and whimpering. I fought the urge to run out the door and forge stupid ideas like honor and duty. As I supported myself against the TV leaning against the wall, I began to catch my breath. I did a couple of rounds of combat breathing to lower my racing heart rate. I also let out a curse word every other exhale. I had a job to do, and I knew I had to replace the paralyzing fear with something else. Life had taught me anger could override fear and push you past exhaustion in a pinch. I also steadied myself with a mental checklist. I would finish this call, I would find the baby, call an ambulance for mom, and stop Zeke, or whatever was out there. Then I could go 10-8 and drink coffee at the office. Everything would be normal. I knelt down and checked the mother. She wouldn't respond to anything I asked her. Her pupils were as big as saucers, and they showed no reaction to my light. A brief pat-down revealed no apparent injuries. But then I heard it again, the soft cry of an infant, but it wasn't coming from the hallway. It sounded closer. I shot up immediately and saw a figure to the right of my periphery. I twirled to highlight a dark figure of a person standing in the kitchen. The figure's back was turned to me with shoulders hunched. It wore a ratty black raincoat, torn and frayed. "Let me see your hands!" I yelled. The figure didn't budge. I could hear him mumbling as he bobbed his shoulders. "Hey, listen to me, asshole! I swear to God, I'll shoot you! Hands up, turn around slowly!" I could hear him start cooing softly. "But my hands are full, deputy." He croaked at me slowly, turning around. It was Zeke, and he was cradling the baby in his arms. My whole body tensed up at the sight. This child couldn't have been more than a year old. I could see the child moving its arms and wiggling about. Thank God for that, but Zeke's grasp was firmly around the base of the skull. His disgusting hand palming its delicate head like it was holding a baseball. The dirty nails on his pointer finger were gently tapping on the child's nose. I mentally weighed my options. Seeing Zeke holding the child reminded me of how terrified I felt when I first held my newborn nephew. He was so fragile, I thought I could crush him on accident. I knew Zeke was playing upon that fear to keep me at bay. I could shoot him in the face. It wouldn't be the hardest shot to make. As if sensing my thoughts, Zeke let go of the child infant's head and let it dangle upside down by the leg. Now the child commenced with screaming as it swung back and forth like a pendulum. Zeke outstretched his arms, presenting the baby to me, purposely holding the baby directly in front of the muzzle of my gun. Take a shot. Kill the bad guy. Save the family. Zeke hissed. It's what you train for all these years. He continued as he took a step towards me, shortening the distance to about 4 feet. I could see the tears pouring off the child's chubby face, running down its forehead to sprinkle the floor. I pulled my gun away from the child and held it close to my chest, terrified to have something so dangerous so close to something so precious. I took half a step back when I realized I was losing my advantage. Zeke thought I had tunnel vision on shooting him. He expected me to step back and keep my distance, like cops were trained to do. But I always liked a good fight. I came up with a plan to holster my weapon and rush at him. I'd grab the baby from his hand while giving him a kick to the knee. I'd catch him off guard by springing my attack in the middle of him telling me something. Zeke, listen to me. You have the right to remain silent. My gun started to lower to my holster, my offhand pointing to the light in his eyes. Anything you say can be used against you. A grin began to widen on Zeke's face. If you cannot afford I tensed to attack. Zeke whipped the baby into the air. Time slowed around me as I saw the child arch upwards and almost hit the ceiling. I must have instinctively dropped my weapon in light as my arms reached to catch the child as it descended. My hands searched the darkness where my brain predicted the child must be falling. I felt a soft body and eagerly pulled the child into my chest. The instant my brain confirmed I had secured the infant, my eyesight exploded with stars as my head rocked back. While reeling backwards, another blow hit me inside of the right knee. I buckled and fell to my back. The gear on my duty belt jammed painfully into me. I immediately began frantically searching the ground around me with my right hand. I couldn't let Zeke get my weapon. I began to sit up and roll to my side in a desperation attempt to shield the baby. I received a crushing knee to my belly as Zeke landed on me with all of his weight. I let out a grunt of pain and wrapped the child tighter in my chest. He straddled me and pulled himself closer by the collar of my overvest. I could smell his teeth and stench cascading off him, his enlarged eyes staring into mine. I realized with horror that Zeke had no intention of going for my gun. With a crazed smile in his face, he embraced me with a hug and began to squeeze. He was going to squeeze the life out of the baby. I had to recall my searching right hand to push back against Zeke. I had to recall my searching right hand to push against Zeke. We struggled like this for what seemed like eternity. He was mounted on top of me, giving me a bear hug, and I desperately tried pushing him away with the right hand while shielding the baby with my left. I knew the amount of force he was putting on me was unnatural. He was wiry and about 6 inches shorter than me. I had at least 40 pounds in the guy, and I was in decent shape, but I felt my back crack and I gasped. The poor child began to wheeze. Our bodies sandwiched him. I was getting desperate, and my mind brought up a memory I had tucked away for a rainy day, hoping I'd never have to use it. I remembered a salty former Devil Dog SWAT instructor teaching us room-clearing tactics in the academy. It was the end of the day, and he began to share war stories about his time in the Corps.
Most people don't know the quickest way to kill someone is by putting their thumb right through the bad guy's eye socket.
He said with a wicked smile, mimicking the action by thrusting his gnarled thumbs with a quick jab.
Straight into the brain.
He finished as he twisted his thumbs and made a squish with his mouth. Yeah, my body cringed just like yours did as you read this. He must have seen the group of us cadets physically withdrawal, and he continued.
The trick is getting your brain to override your sense of basic human decency, kill another human being in this horrific way. Your mind will fight you on it. It's not natural to want to do this to your fellow man. Even now that you know it, you might not be able to do it when the time comes.
I was used to mind games and hazing from alpha military types, trying to scare us into quitting. I thought on what he said that day, unsure if I could kill or maim someone in such a horrible way. I'd have to exhaust all other options. But now as I lay on my back, my body failing and a child being crushed between us, I had to dig deep to survive. Zeke blinked for the first time during this whole confrontation. A look of realization passed over him. His grin even wider as he began to chuckle. He released me from his hug and quickly grabbed my head with both hands, his thumbs moving for my eyes. I closed my eyes as I felt his dirty thumbnails scrape across my eyelids. Panic leapt inside me as I realized what he was doing. Even though my eyes were closed, I had a mental picture where he was. My right hand struck out and my thumb pierced right through something smooth and soft. Warm liquid immediately engulfed my hand and splashed across my face. I didn't realize I was screaming until the copper-tasting liquid poured into my mouth. I could taste what it was, and I knew what I had done, but I had to open my eyes and see. Sure enough, my thumb was deeply embedded in Zeke's left eye socket. He still grinned manically at me as blood oozed out of him. I pushed him up and away from me as I bucked and I twisted frantically. He finally rolled off to my left and my thumb came free from his eye socket. I heard him kicking and thumping away from me as he retreated into the darkness. I sat up with the child and quickly searched for my light and my gun. I found it and snatched it up. I didn't see Zeke. The child resumed its deafening scream and I could feel my heart pounding through my entire body. After a couple of moments of pointing my weapon at the dark and cradling the child, I noticed how strange my weapon felt in my blood-covered hand. I noticed the screaming baby had sounded loud and healthy. And I noticed we were both alone. Alone! The child's mother was missing.